All right, thank you all for coming tonight. This is the April 24th, 2017 meeting of the Environmental Public Works Committee. Will come to order. David, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Baroth? Here. Chairwoman Boyce?
Here.
Mr. Brew?
Here.
Ms. DeFlorio?
Here.
Mr. Flagler-Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Howland is excused. Mr. Marinetti?
Here.
President Daniele?
Here.
Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
There's not.
Seeing none in the audience, we will move on to the approval of the minutes. And you'll have the March 30th, 2017 minutes before you of the Environmental Public Works Committee. They'll stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes before the end of the day. Next item on the agenda is our new business.
Referral 17-0131. Authorized.
Moved by Legislator Brew, second by Legislator DeFlorio. Questions on the floor? Yes, Mr. Flagler-Mitchell.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, I'm good tonight. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the administration, when will this phase begin?
Through the chair, construction of the project would begin after legislative approval, presumably at next month's meeting, followed by a typically about 8-week time frame to execute all the actual construction contracts. So we would anticipate issuing a notice to proceed in and around July of this summer.
Okay. And also, through you, Madam Chair, which buildings is this work will be getting done in?
Through the chair, as the referral references, it's the Civic Center complex, but more specifically to your question, work is physically going to occur in several of the mechanical room spaces that are in the upper and lower levels of the garage. I'll say the perimeter of the garage that are in effect the basements of the Hall of Justice predominantly. There will also be some work physically in the Watts building.
And through you, Madam Chair, to the administration, was AAC the only asbestos company to bid?
Through the chair, yes, we received only the single bid on the asbestos contract.
And last question for me, through you, Madam Chair. What was the engineer's estimate for the asbestos abatement?
Through the chair, the engineer's estimate was $118,000. The actual bid was the $203,900. So the bid price was 42% high.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Yes, Mr. Brew.
Through the chair, to the administration, in addition to the work being confined to mostly the mechanical rooms in the Watts building, could you be a little more specific regarding the scope of the work that is involved?
Through the chair, yes, and to expound on that original question, there will physically be work in a couple of different floors of the Hall of Justice as well, but the work specifically includes updating and replacing the domestic water service pump system and the hot water heating elements for portions of the Civic Center. It also includes work on the chilled water pump system as well. So basically the house water system, if you will, for the complex. Several lighting panels and electrical panel and transformer replacement work. Again, that's in predominantly the mechanical spaces down below. And then, of course, the work does extend up and into the buildings proper.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. I'm
Chair.
sorry, Mr. Baroff.
Through the chair to the administration, following up on my colleague's questions, the asbestos abatement that's been discussed, where's that primarily being done? In the garage area, in the Watts building area, or the Hall of Justice area?
Through the chair, without again referring specifically to the detailed plans, there is work in the basement area but I do believe there's some isolated abatement in the building spaces. I'd have to get back to you with more details on exactly where.
Well, then, through the chair, is it fair to say that the bulk of the work is in the basement and the mechanical areas of the garage area, as opposed to in either the Hall of Justice floors or the Watts building? I would expect those to be the isolated pieces. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay.
through the chair, yes it is.
And then finally, through the chair to the administration, and this is, I know abatement simply means essentially trapping asbestos in place. It's not removing asbestos, it's abating the effects of the asbestos. Do we know what the lifetime or the expected lifetime of the abatement to be, through the chair?
Through the chair, actually, abatement is in fact removal.
It can't always be, it's not,
Yeah, not always. So you're referring to, you can encapsulate it in place and make sure it's not disturbed or can't become,
Yes.
as they say, friable and airborne, certainly. But in this instance, and in at least most instances, when we refer to abatement, we are referring to the actual proper isolation, removal, and then replacement with appropriate materials.
thank you, it's very clarifying.
Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item on the agenda.
Referral 17-0132, authorized.
Questions on the floor? Mr. Baroff.
Through the chair of the administration, first let me say that I'm very excited about this plan and I'm wholeheartedly in favor. I just have a couple questions regarding that. One, through the chair, when do we expect this phase to begin and how long do we anticipate it to take?
Through the chair, so this particular phase, as referenced, is the planning phase. Again, within certainly a hopeful legislative authorization at adoption rather at next month's meeting, and execution of contracts within approximately 2 months following. We would hope to start this work in June, and we have an estimated completion of 8 weeks, so August of this summer.
Excellent. And as a quick follow-up through the chair to the administration, can we have a copy, or maybe we have a copy of the completed environmental assessment when it's done, through the chair?
Through the chair, yes, we can provide that.
Thank you. And then finally, this is a bit of an odd question, but I noticed in the referral itself, it does say, and this is a good thing, we want to quote, the project will bring the park up to current standards. I'm just curious, is there an organization that sets these current standards, or those are just taken from up-to-date business practices, through the chair?
Through the chair, as used in this context, we're referring to bringing it up to appropriate accessibility standards, which could be certainly, which would refer to ADA standards, and appropriate, I guess, best practices for parks, recreation, trails, et cetera. I can't name for you offhand, specifically the design standard specific to the parks, but I could provide that information as a follow-up.
That's not actually necessary. I was just curious if we actually had something we were following. I mean, it's always good to make improvements. I didn't know if we would be expecting additional improvements in years to come just because the standards of materials, for example, change. But if it's not necessary to dig up a particular organization or anything. But thank you.
Anything further? Yes, Mr. Flegler Mitchell.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the administration, what is the what is being considered that will reduce the operation and maintenance costs? Maybe I missed that answer. Through you, Madam Chair, to the administration.
Through the chair, effectively by improving, and replacing and modernizing the facility, we're going to replace and eliminate older, antiquated facilities that have obviously cumulative maintenance needs. And as much as we do our very best to keep up on those things that are older and dated tend to need a little bit more TLC, if you will. So by virtue of modernizing it and making it new, we're reducing those maintenance costs.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. Will we be provided with the parks improvement update? Or can we be provided?
Through the chair, yes, we could provide that.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Any further questions? Before we vote on this matter, I'd just like to recognize the fact that Legislator DeFlorio moved this and Legislator Marinetti seconded this. Okay. Seeing no other further questions, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next item on the agenda.
Referral 17-0133, authorized.
Moved by Legislator Marinetti, seconded by Legislator and President of our esteemed body, Mr. Daniele. Any questions on the floor? Legislator DeFlorio.
Yes, through you to the administration, do we have an explanation as to why CP Ward withdrew their bid?
Can you use the microphone, madam?
Sorry.
Thank you, madam.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please, for the record.
Do we have a reason, or do we know the reason why CP Ward withdrew their bid?
Through the chair, yes, we do. CP Ward, when they submitted their bid, transposed their numerical bid incorrectly in their written bid, and the county legally acknowledges the written bid, so it was incorrect, substantially less than they had originally intended.
Thank you.
Anything further? Yes, Mr. Brock.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, what was the engineer's estimate for the plumbing construction?
Through the chair, the estimate was $1,389,000.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Flagler Mitchell.
To you to the administration, Madam Chair. What would be the time frame for these contracts? I'm sorry, timeline for the contracts.
Through the chair, with the presumed adoption and subsequent completion of construction contracts, we would anticipate starting the work in July of this year with an anticipated 9-month schedule for completion in April of 2018.
Thank you.
Anything further? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Next item on the agenda.
Referral 17-0135,
Moved by Legislator Brew, second by Legislator DeFlorio. Questions on the floor? Yes, Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair to the administration, there's a phrase at the bottom of the second paragraph that says the fluids, the de-icing fluids, leave the airport and, quote, typically being ultimately processed by the Van Laer treatment plant. And my question is there any circumstance that we can imagine why the fluid would end up not going to the Van Laer treatment plant? Through the chair.
Through the chair, Gary Gaskin from the airport. The system we have at present is more of a first flush where we pick up what initially runs off from the airline's application of de-iced fluids. It goes into a drainage system that was put in about 15 years ago, goes to a pump station, and that fluid goes to the treatment plant. Fluids that falls on the ramp, and snowplow management pushes that off to the side or stays on the airplanes. That does not get to the treatment plant. The improvements we're doing, we're going to ultimately have a system where we're using Vector trucks to pick up the fluids where it pools on the ramp, so a much greater volume will get to the treatment plant. But with a project that was implemented this year being 17, we're better able to manage the discharge rate to the plant, so it's better for the plant.
That makes sense. Through the chair of the administration, so ultimately it's either going to go to the Van Laer treatment plant or it will just go nowhere, correct? Through the chair? Into the groundwater?
Into the groundwater, into the air, it goes where it wants to go.
Thank you. And then finally, through the chair of the administration, I would imagine the bulk of it, however, does make it to the treatment plant. Do you have an understanding or an estimation of how much it would actually constitute the bulk of the de-icing fluid that's spilled? How much actually makes it to the Van Laer and how much doesn't?
Through the chair, I'd have to bring you a number at a later time. there's quite a bit that ends up in the air just as a matter of course. I would hate to give you a number right today.
Well, then, through the chair, I'd appreciate if you could get those numbers to us before the full-fledged meeting.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Any further questions? Yes, Mr. Legler Mitchell.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the administration, just a follow-up question. Has there been any environmental harm as a result of the current de-icing activities? Through you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, the fluids go to the Genesee River, which is not a drinking body of water. With DES, we monitor the outfalls to the river on a regular basis and those reports are done through the environmental groups. There is no measurable impact on the river.
Okay.
But there are standards we have to meet.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I just have one, if I could. This is kind of like a factoid for me. But is there a data kept on how often we de-ice planes?
So the de-icing, through the chair, through you, if
Through
that's
me.
okay.
Yes.
All the de-icing activities are done by vendors retained by each of an individual airline.
Right.
So they record the application because they're billing them for the service.
Oh,
And they're
okay.
actually providing this case is primarily U.S. airports. FedEx does their own planes, but those companies are buying the fluid. They're applying it to the specific airline, to that air carrier. They charge, if they put 500 gallons on, they're going to bill them for 500 gallons. So there's a very precise record of the application. And that's kept on file the county maintains all those records.
All right, thank you very much. Seeing no other further questions, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes. Next item on the agenda,
Referral 17-0136.
moved by Legislator DeFlorio, second by Legislator Marionetti. Questions on the floor? Yes, Mr. Barak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair of the Administration, this referral states that the project will be funded by New York State Department of Transportation, passenger facility charges, and local shares. Could you provide a breakdown by percentage of who is providing how much of the funding? Through the Chair.
Madam Chair, in round percentages, New York State represents roughly 74% of the funding. The PFC charges represent approximately 20% of the funding, and the local share is approximately 5% of the funding.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Mr. Legler Mitchell.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to the administration. Will the Chase oversee the entire project?
Through the chair, the firm of LaChase will be representing the county, the owner, during the construction phase of the project, yes.
Okay, and through you, Madam Chair, when will this project begin?
The first project is what we term the cell phone lot or smartphone. The work has started. The governor decided there would be a press conference at 10 tomorrow, so I guess that's when it starts.
Yeah. All right. All right, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Mr.
The
Burke.
Chair, how many construction management proposals were received by the county in addition to LaChase?
Through the chair, the county with the aviation with the assistance of the purchasing department, I believe we had 6 or 7 respondents, and it was a request for qualifications and approach. From those, a selection committee was seated, and they did their review of the group, and the recommendation was the LaChase firm.
So through the chair, through the administration, so LaChase may not have necessarily been the lowest price, but the administration feels that they were the best value, bringing the best experience to the project. Am I correct?
As a clarification, they provided a statement of qualification. There was no pricing with what was provided initially. We selected that firm, the committee selected that firm based on qualifications, and then a price was negotiated.
Okay. And then when was the price, through the chair, then when was the price established?
Through the chair, it was established prior to this referral being written, and that would be about a month ago.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay, anything further? Okay. Oh, so we'll vote on this. All in favor? Signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes. Next item on the agenda. I guess that's it. Okay, so we have other matters. So due to the recent attention with regards to the Van Laer treatment plant, I've asked that the director of the DES, Mike Garland, come in to update the committee as to what's going on with the plant. So Mr. Garland, can you inform the committee as to what's going on?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My pleasure. I know many of you have visited Van Laer and familiar with the pure water system. And to talk about Van Laer, I'd just like to review generally the infrastructure that supports it. We've got over 1,500 miles of local surface sewers, 100 miles of large diameter interceptors, and 30 miles of deep rock tunnels as part of our sea-soaked tunnel system, and 62 pump stations. So it's a very extensive network, and one that majority of the flow generated in Monroe County, particularly the city of Rochester, flows to Van Laer. We do have our deep rock tunnel system, really our own modern marvel here in our community. It was one of 3 built through federal construction grants, and really the envy of many counties and cities across the country. And it stands as a great example of what can be done to abate wet weather flow. So we proudly operate that system, and again, it stands as an example for other communities who are striving to manage wet weather flows in their cities, particularly those in the Northeast. We've worked hard over the years to establish a high degree of environmental compliance on a consistent basis. I think we've earned that recognition amongst our state regulators, the New York State DEC. And so we strive to maintain consistent high performance in terms of our environmental compliance. You may have read in the media over the last few years we've had some challenges associated with that, particularly this past December when I characterized the plant as being very sick. You know, obviously, because you're part of PWAB, ultimately you support the Pure Waters Capital Program. We've got a very robust capital program, and we make regular investments in our processes, and we update those on a regular basis. Our aeration system is really the heart and soul of our treatment plant. Those of you who've been to the plant know that it's where the biological treatment process occurs. We've got physical, we've got chemical treatment, but the biological process is really the key to the treatment of our wastewater at Van Laer. And what we do there is we grow biology, microbiology, to feed off of the organic waste that comes into the plant, and it takes up phosphorus and nutrients as well too. So it's really the fundamental process at Van Laer. And where we've had some challenges have been associated with the aeration project, and that was a 4-year construction project. And the reason we had to undertake that over that period of time is that we had to do it in situ. We had to do it while the older system was still in place, the older aeration system. So the construction began back in 2011, and it was essentially complete in June of 2015 with some subsequent modifications. And we experienced some periods of compliance challenges over that time. And certainly, again, we take great pride in our compliance, and we always want to strive for consistently high performance compliance, but we were challenged over the period of construction. Again, it's not unlike performing open heart surgery. You had to keep the patient alive while we were upgrading the aeration system. And the old aeration system, again, for those who have been there, are a series of surface mechanical aerators, like large propellers that infuse oxygen into the waste stream. And oxygen is a key ingredient, really, for the biology to survive and decompose the organic waste stream going through and take up the nutrients. So we need to infuse oxygen into the system. We had the old system that had been running for nearly 40 years, consistently 24/7, and it was a very inefficient system. We were replacing it with an industry standard, which is fine bubble diffusion, not unlike your aquarium, where you're bubbling air up through the bottom of the tank. So we have 20 tanks that exist in the center of the plant. But it's a sophisticated system. Not only the plant sophisticated, our whole collection system is very sophisticated. And so it has to be done very carefully. We began the design back in 2009. We began construction in late 2011, and again, as I mentioned, wrapped it up in 2015. And during that period, we experienced some degrees of noncompliance that we were watching, carefully monitoring and managing. In 2015, we began to see more significant noncompliance, but again, the system wasn't fully constructed. We had very cold, severely cold temperatures at that time. We had some other, what we regarded as external factors contributing to what we thought were challenges associated with the performance of the system. But it was in early 2016 that, again, with the system fully installed, the system wasn't operating as well as we'd expected. We were working very closely with the engineer of record for looking at operational parameters, looking at other physical modifications that could be made, and other technology that could improve the performance of this new state-of-the-art system. So again, we experienced challenges throughout 2016, looking at ways that we can improve the system performance, getting back to that consistently high environmental compliance. And as one would with a sick patient, we made the recommendation to retain the services of another engineering firm to provide a second opinion. And that second opinion is underway now. In December, we experienced a phenomenon known as a filament bloom that caused the plant to go into significant upset. That was in December. Our new engineering team actually came on December 1st. So they were able to learn from that upset as to what improvements could be made and what modifications could be done. They've been on board and very engaged in the evaluation. The company is Arcadis, probably not unfamiliar to you. But we've made a number of modifications already and seen improvement in the process. We're optimistic. Throughout this entire time, I should say that we have kept the New York State DEC apprised and kept them involved in the decision-making process that we've made and where we've had challenges, so they are aware. We had a meeting in January on the status of the system. Our engineering firm, Arcadis, gave a presentation to the DEC, and I would say they were encouraged with the progress that we were making and the path that we were following. We have more work to do. We're doing pilot-scale testing. We're doing some full-scale testing as well. We've made some physical improvements to the aeration basins, and we're seeing improvement, but we've got a ways to go. And I expect through the course of the next 3 to 6 months, as we run our pilot scale and see the results of some of our full-scale testing, we'll be able to report back to you in terms of progress and performance. We will be meeting with the state DEC again on Wednesday to update them on progress being made. But I'm encouraged and I'm optimistic that we're on the right path and that we are going to solve this.
Does anybody have any further questions? Yes, President Daniele.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, and thank you, Mike, for a very thoughtful presentation. And I know from my years in the legislature and having done several tours myself of the plant that there are many, many dedicated employees of the county that are in that facility that work hard every day to make it happen, to do a job that I think as the general population may not appreciate what goes into handling our wastewater. So thank you. A couple of quick questions. When you say that I guess the tanks or the microbiology was not performing, quote unquote, as you would have expected it to, was that from a lack of oxygen, meaning there wasn't enough oxygen getting in the water, or was it more the microbiology not responding to the new, or I guess the more modern method of introducing the oxygen into the water?
Through you, Madam Chair, the challenges we had to do with settling ultimately. And we're trying to grow the bugs, is what we call them, in a manner that they flock together. They attract one another, and then they settle out properly in the clarifiers, which are the tanks that just downstream of the aeration system. So we're trying to create an environment where we're growing the right bugs and in the right manner and in the right concentration, that they properly attract to one another, form these clumps, if you will, and then settle out properly in the clarifiers.
Okay. And through you, Madam Chair, out of curiosity, and again, I've been following this reconstruction of these aeration tanks for the past, 6-7 years. And you said there's 20 tanks currently.
Through Madam Chair, that's
When you
correct.
take a tank out of service because you're, putting the new aeration system into it, how long does it take from the time you take essentially 1/20th of the capacity of the plant down before that tank gets put back into service, and then once it's back into service, how long until it starts performing at a somewhat normal capacity?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, we would, during the winter months, the cooler months, we tend to operate all basins. During the summer months, we can operate with less, even down to 14 tanks. We would take down a series of tanks, maybe 4 at a time, over a 3 to 4 month period before they were put back online. But we worked hard to always maintain adequate capacity in the system by either keeping the old system operational and bringing the new system online.
And how long, through you, Madam Chair, would that normally take? Ballpark. I mean, I'm sure it was different for different.
Yeah. Again, we began, it was really a 4-year construction period. And we had some periods where we had to maintain all tanks, and we wouldn't take a tank down. So we did roughly, say on average, over the 4-year period, 5 tanks a year, if you will. Probably was done maybe 4 at a time, but on average 5 year we would complete.
Okay. And my last question, through you, Madam Chair, was the manufacturer, or I'm calling it a manufacturer without really having much knowledge about it, but this new micro bubble, or whatever you called it, the fish tank theory of oxygen coming from the bottom, what was the manufacturer or supplier of this newer technology cooperative and helpful in helping resolve this issue? I mean, obviously, it seems like that it's a very unique process, and I'm sure every plant is different around the country, so it's not a widget you just buy and throw in the tank like you would a fish tank. Was the manufacturer, I guess my question, cooperative, and do they continue to be helpful and support this new technology?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, you're correct. Every plant is different. But neither engineering team have found any flaws in the actual physical system that was installed, any flaws that we could point to say that it's not functioning properly. And again, it's a fine bubble diffusion system with blowers and piping, manifolds, and ceramic discs that blow the air up. So it's relatively simple in concept. It's just how it's configured in the tanks. You have zones of aerated zones and non-aerated zones, and how the flow is configured in the tanks is really what we're focusing on. So so essentially it's the design. It's looking at the design rather than the actual
Hardware.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Garland.
Yes, Legislator DeFlorio.
Yes, through the chair.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Kind of curious, does what goes into the system affect the overall health of the system? So I guess I'm thinking, people flush antibiotics or other pharmaceuticals, de-icing fluids, any, fertilizers. So those things affect the overall health of the system. Could that be upsetting the?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, we have a wide range of, say, pollutants that come into the system, right? Either from food processing, from residential waste. So we're set up to deal with a wide range of those pollutants coming in, and the system's designed to be able to handle the fluctuation in loading as well as concentrations. So, and we obviously have got a lot of data in terms of what comes into the plant. So we have not identified any particular external factor that is somehow having a detrimental impact on the system's performance.
Thank you.
Yes, Legislator.
You're the chair, and I'd also like to thank Mike coming in and giving us the the details of the plan status over the past few months. But I'd like to ask a question, and I think I have most of it provided in what you've stated before, Mike. But through the chair is, so would you categorize the issues with the plant right now more of a mechanical nature and not so much of a process control nature, and that you are trying to redirect the oxygenated portion of the intake in the right directions? What I'm getting at is if there is a mechanical design failure or some sort of a structural design flaw in making this work versus something that might be easier to address, as in controlling the process itself. And I'm sorry if I'm doing a bad job explaining my question, but do your best to try to answer that, Mike.
No, I understand your question, and we certainly are. With any new system, we have to look at a new operational procedure, right? We call them our SOPs, Standard Operating Procedures. So with any new system, you've got to adapt the operation to that. So we certainly are looking at that, but we have not identified any flaws with the way that the men and women who operate the plants 24/7 have contributed to the problems that we've had with the system performance. We're really focused on the design and the configuration of the tanks and the process itself. How do we grow the right biology so that it settles out properly and that it can handle the different loadings that are coming into the plant, as well as the different flows that are coming into the plant, because we're part of a combined system, so we can see a wide range of flows coming into the system. So our focus is on the design and how we optimize the design and what physical modifications the system might require to achieve that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. And one more question to the chair. So what would you anticipate those physical modifications to be, if needed?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, we've done some modifications already in the tank. The tanks have some baffling. They're physical structures within the tank that can help promote the right biological growth. We've already made modifications there. We can make modifications in terms of how we control gates and how we can control valves and how we direct the flow in a way to optimize the performance of the biological system. We hope to retain the majority of the system that's been installed. That's our expectation, that we'll be able to do that. So we're going through a pilot scale testing that's been affectionately referred to as Frank Jr., for Frankie Van Laer treatment plant. We've created a small pilot scale that's allowing us to optimize the performance of the system and better understand how we can achieve that consistently high environmental compliance.
Yeah. And through the chair, I'd just like to thank you again, Mike. And I fully realize that, spending a career in process controls, that, every application is different and it is unique. So best of luck in trying to shake that solution out, Mike.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. Legislative Blowout.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I too would like to thank Mike for coming in today. I do appreciate it. I enjoy our conversations, and I'm one of the lucky ones who has toured Van Laer in the past, and I actually hope to go there again. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the modifications that you're discussing. I do have a number of questions. Some of them are follow-ups on questions asked already, and some of them are along different veins. But first off, I would like to ask, you mentioned the second firm that we brought in is Arcadis. What is the name of the first engineering team that we brought in on this project?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, O'Brien and Gear.
O'Brien and Gear. And through the chair, do we still have a relationship with them on this particular project?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, yes, we do. They are really in a closeout phase of the project, so they are still finalizing closeout documentation as part of the construction of the project itself.
Thank you. And through the chair, when do we expect that process to be done or complete?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, over the next 2, maybe 3 months, finalize that.
Thank you. Finally, well, actually, I shouldn't say finally. Sorry.
No, that's not.
Yeah, I've done that before. You've mentioned towards the end of the questioning, earlier question, that we also are part of a system, so we have different flows coming in. And I realize that there are ways of controlling the flow as it affects the biology. But in particular, if I'm correct through the chair, the biology needs a certain period of time to affect its work. It has to have time to consume the nutrients. And if there's too much flow coming in, it won't have that time. So my question for you then is, through the chair, is how much of the violations that we've heard about in the past due to the design flaws that you've identified, or due to outside environmental influences like excessive water coming in, and so it is either being diverted so it doesn't go through the system because there's no place for it to be stored, or it just goes through too quickly. Do you see what I'm saying?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, the upset that we had in December was not, I would say, attributable to a flow challenge. Again, we need the system is designed to be able to handle a wide range of flow. But when the biology is not settling properly and the clarifiers, and this is what Arcadis discovered, is that the way that the bugs were coming together, they were like slippery balloons. You know, we're trying to get them to glom together and stick together and settle out, so that the system becomes sensitive to any flow fluctuations, where if you have a more robust microbiology, you can process that. So while we have seen some of compliance issues associated with the poorly settling biology that's affected by flow, but under the right operating conditions, our system is designed to be able to handle different levels of flow, and that's our goal.
And through the chair, including excessive flows, like heavy water events and things like that.
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, yes, our wet weather events, which we obviously have had a significant number of those recently, and that is part of our pilot and full-scale testing, looking at ensuring that we're operating the system and the system can perform properly during all flow ranges.
Thank you. And through the chair of the administration, you mentioned you're meeting with the DEC on Wednesday to update them. During that process, do we anticipate that we are in or not in current violation of any standards currently?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, we have had some permit violations this month, nowhere near as significant as those that we experienced in December. There were a few, and some were quite small. We had a couple small violations in March. But I would say that is not an indication that we're not making good progress. I feel confident we're making very good progress, and that the scale and frequency of some of the violations we've had, which we've reported to the DEC, while we've had them, I'm confident we're still making solid progress and performance forward.
Thank you. Through the chair of the administration, to follow up on that, I appreciate the fact that even if we have small violations now, that's an improvement upon what happened in December, and I understand that. My question is, can you give me a description of, you mentioned there's some current violations now in April. What is the nature of what you would consider to be the most significant one?
Yep. The way, through Madam Chairwoman, the way I would characterize those two, and certainly we don't like any violations, sure. Right? We strive very hard to minimize those. But again, as we are understanding the system and its performance, we've had what we call settable solids. What those are basically is biology. It's biology that hasn't settled properly, and during certain circumstances will flow out of the clarifiers. It is disinfected before it goes out to the lake. That's really the sol mass that's grown in our treatment system.
Thank you. And that makes sense, because I recall from an earlier discussion that was a concern even last year. The solid matter sometimes does get out. Finally, through the chair, you mentioned that you've kept the DNC apprised and involved throughout this process from when the first challenges were noticed, and I think that's a very wise and appropriate thing to do. I would ask that this body, either as a whole or through this committee, be kept apprised and involved as well, simply because we all use the same facilities, and it's incumbent upon us to provide the appropriate oversight and have these questioning sessions. So I'd appreciate if we could do that more so moving forward, and I would expect that to occur.
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, I'd be happy to update.
Thank you. And then finally, thank you so much again for coming in. I do appreciate it. I do think you run a good operation, and I want that to be said publicly. I think you do. And I realize nothing's perfect, but when we have major issues, we need to know about them so we can actually address them and at least help address them, and then provide appropriate information for the public as a whole, as opposed to finding out in newspapers, which is not my preferred way anyhow. Thank you.
Any further questions? Can I, as a chair, can I just ask a couple of questions? One I have, for my constituency would be, is there anything we can do to kind of educate the public as to how they can help to, mitigate this in any way as Legislator DeFleur? I mean, she asked a question about, certain items going into our system. Is there anything we can do further for the public?
Well, to you, Madam Chairwoman, I wouldn't discourage anyone from flushing their toilets. That's, that's what I want to continue to do.
Yeah.
Just kidding, of course. There's a lot of good information on the website just about how the system works. And I often encourage people to look at that so they have an appreciation of the scale and sophistication of the city, the system, particularly in the city of Rochester with the Deep Rock tunnels. Our community is full of environmental stewards, and we've got a long history of environmental stewardship. So, again, I think it's telling the good story about the system that we have here, and that we've got a very progressive system. It's really one of a kind in the country.
Okay. And then just one further question with regards to the, talked about that the DEC, had some, I guess we had some compliance issues. Are there any, would there be, or is there any fines affiliated with those when we're out of compliance?
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, there have been none to date.
Okay. Did I open Pandora's box?
No, not at all.
Oh, please.
Although if you had, no, just kidding. Through the chair, I just want to pass on a conversation that the director and I actually had one day regarding what can the public do. It had to do with a conversation I had with someone else who shall remain nameless about whether or not it was a good idea to use our garbage disposals. If you had food and put in the garbage disposal, you may recall this conversation, and we had a large argument, and he resolved it in essentially saying, don't use the garbage disposal, put it in the garbage instead. It'll go to the landfill, it'll turn to methane to be harvested, but if you have to put it through the water system, it has to come out again, and that's actually a lot of energy and problem. So there are things we can do, and water barrels and other things as well. So there's a lot we can actually pass along. I think as a committee, we could actually put together perhaps a pamphlet or a flyer, a little page on the website. There are things we can do that I think would be very helpful, and of course we could borrow from the expertise of our department to actually do this. So I think we should actually grab the moment and take something that was a challenging situation
I think so too.
and go from there.
Yep, I agree.
In a bipartisan spirit, I'd even say.
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, I guess I would too, encourage the folks to use things like the Eco Park. Again, this is all on the county website. We want to divert certain materials that some folks may introduce into the waste stream to end up at the landfill or down the sewers. So the Eco Park's key, and that's why the Household Hazardous Waste program was really born and bred out of the Pure Waters program to keep it out of the landfill. So the more you can spread the word about recycling and the Eco Park, it would be better. In fact, I've got magnets if you'd like some.
Oh, that'd be great.
So yeah, again, great source of information. Stormwater as well too. Rain barrels are good and certainly advisable to minimize, particularly in the city, flow into our combined system. So, but I'm happy to talk about it more offline.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. So, yes. Oh, you're welcome, anytime. Mike would love to see us all the time, I'm sure. All right. So, that was other matters. If there's no other matters after that, the April 24th meeting of the Environmental Public Works Committee stands adjourned, and the next meeting of our committee will be held May the 22nd at 5:45 p.m. Thank you.